Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1046B, and today's date is August 11th, 2016, and the title of the episode is U.S. Government Just Went into Overdrive, Pushing War. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, out in Germany, we understand there were many different false flags, and we knew part of the agenda was to create tougher laws for the people, not for the terrorists. And we see that Germany's interior minister unveiled a proposal to boost security after the recent attacks, and they'll be creating new security laws. Now, they went on to say that they were going to boost security after the attacks, including making it easier to deport foreigners deemed dangerous and stripping dual nationals who fight for extremist groups of their German citizenship. Well, first of all, deport foreigners deemed dangerous. What are the criteria for this? They really don't list it. They also said they'll be creating several thousand jobs at federal security services over the coming years and making promoting terrorism a criminal offense. Well, what does promoting terrorism actually mean? It's funny how they use these vague general terms, because if you really think about it, those individuals who talk out against the government, they can say they're terrorists. Today, under the U.S. laws, the Founding Fathers would be terrorists. And we can see that most of the countries are going down this path. And the reason why they're creating all of these draconian laws is because they can use them later on to say, yes, this fits into our model, you are the terrorists. Because when the people start to rise up, when the system breaks down, they will go after those individuals. And they want the definition to be very broad, very general, so they can fit it to any category. So they can use them against their own people. And this is what each and every one of these countries are doing, because they know exactly what's happening here. This doesn't stop terrorism. Most of the terrorism is created by the governments. They're inside jobs to scare the people into doing things they wouldn't normally do, like give up their rights, give up their weapons, and to be controlled. And this is what we're seeing. And we're looking at this situation across Europe, the Middle East, the Pacific, and we're seeing the entire situation. It's really ramping up right now. Because in the end, what they really want is to cover up this economic collapse. And the only way to do that is to have some type of an event to start a war. And this way they can explain away why all of this economic turmoil is happening. And we're seeing out in Ukraine, well, the situation is really heating up right now. And this should not come as a surprise to anybody. We have been following this. We've been watching what they've been doing, how they've been probing by firing into the Donbass area, probing, shelling into the area, seeing where the weaknesses are, what they need to improve. The United States, UK, and other nations have been giving non-lethal, lethal weapons to Ukraine. They've been training the military. And we see right now, Ukraine, they have launched about 170 artillery and mortar shells to the frontline zones of the Donetsk area. And at this point, they're getting ready to push this war forward. We see Ukrainian President Poroshenko ordered the country's foreign ministry to initiate the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe Special Monitoring Mission in Crimea. So they want the special monitoring mission to go into Crimea. Now, of course, Russia's going to say, why do we need this? We don't. Well, Ukraine's going to make the case that things are getting out of hand. There's terrorism there. We need to monitor what's going on. And we see the propaganda already starting in the US corporate media, in the UK corporate media. We see headlines like this. Ukraine says Russia has 40,000 troops amassed in Crimea with very bad intentions. Now, we saw this back a couple of years ago when the coup d'etat was happening. They told us there were hundreds of thousands of soldiers on the border. And we have to remember, back in that time period, Germany, UK, the United States, Ukraine flew over the border of Germany using the Open Sky Treaty, and they saw absolutely nothing. An embassy crew drove up and down the border of Ukraine and Russia. They couldn't find the troops. The U.S. tried to prove it by having these 1970 satellite imagery. They were black and white, zoomed out, and then they used Photoshop to circle things, and this was a dot, that was a dot, and they labeled it. But of course, as we know, the satellite imagery today is color, 3D, and they can zoom in right up to a license plate and read it. So we knew that that was completely fake and phony. The other photos they tried to use were back in 2009, where they showed a tank convoy coming into Ukraine, and you can do a very quick search on Google. Just go to images, take the URL of the image, and you can find all the images and the dates from the original image and when it was produced, and you can say, okay, this picture is from 2009. This picture is from 2005. And they're just recycling it. So what we're seeing right now is the United States government orchestrating this entire thing. Poroshenko, well, he is putting all units on combat ready alert. He has brought a huge number of troops up to the border of Crimea and up to the border of Donetsk and Lugansk. And they're just waiting for the right time to go to war here. Now, of course, they do not want it to look like it's coming from Ukraine. This is why they went into Crimea, to try to destroy the area, pretend there were terrorists in there, hoping that Russia would retaliate. But we have to watch the actions of Russia. Russia is not going to start a war. They're not going to fire the first shot. Actually, even if they're fired upon, I don't even think they would fire back, because they know what the U.S. is trying to do. They know what Ukraine is trying to do. They're trying to provoke them once again to go to war. Russia is beating the Islamic State in Syria. The U.S., their backs are against the wall. They have no alternative at this point but to push forward. Does it mean their plans are going to work out? Absolutely not. But their goals are always the same. So we're going to have to watch this situation very, very carefully, because we see things are really heating up, and we're going to see something happen that's going to be really big very soon. Now, we see the United States is orchestrating everything that's going on in Ukraine. They control the government. They tell them what to do. Same thing in the Middle East with all those puppet governments. And we can see the United States is behind this. And Russia laid out what exactly happened. They're gathering evidence. They're presenting it to the United States. And the United States is out there, U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Pyatt, who says that we don't see any evidence to back up Russia's claim that Ukraine was preparing an act of provocation in Crimea. And there's just nothing so far that corroborates Russian allegation. There's nothing here. Well, didn't they say that in Turkey? And all the evidence is pointing to the United States. Every time the United States comes out and says, we see nothing, 99.999999% of the time, they are behind it. So the Russian Federal Security Service said that they have eliminated the spy ring, which was organized by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry in Crimea, and they got their documents, they got their information, that they were preparing to sabotage the critical and life-supporting elements in that area. And we know that the U.S. is backing the Ukraine government, and we know that this was the plan from the beginning. Now, the plan did not work out, but Russia knows the U.S. is not going to give up, because their goal, like we've been saying for a very long time, is to get Crimea back and the southeastern section. They did not get what they paid for. They paid for the entire Ukraine. And the central bankers, they want what they paid for. Now, Russia, they are having a drill now in the Black Sea. It is a 3-day anti-sabotage drill to counter potential underwater attacks. And they're doing this on purpose right now because they see what is happening and they're bringing their forces into this area. Now, a lot of times, the U.S. corporate media, they advertise that Russia is building up their troops for an attack. There's 40,000 troops. But what's happening here is they're having this drill at the same exact time. Was this done on purpose? Most likely. To show that, yeah, we're here. Don't try this again. Are they going to attack Ukraine? Absolutely not. If they really wanted Ukraine, right before the Minsk II ceasefire that Russia created, they were beating the Ukrainian forces. They could have just gone right into Kiev at that point. But they didn't. They backed off. And they said, you know something? We're not going to do this. Crimea wants to be left alone. The southeastern people, they want to be left alone. So let's have peace. But the U.S. government central bankers, Ukraine, they don't want peace. They're never, ever going to fulfill the Minsk II ceasefire agreement. Now, out in Libya, we see that Italy is going to reopen their embassy. They closed it back in February of 2015. And now they're going to reopen it in Tripoli. Why? Because the unity government is there. And we see at this point that Italy, they have their special forces operating in Libya with the UK, with France, and the United States. And the sources said they're operating under the direct command of the Premier's office. Now remember, the unity government has made a call out to the international community for their help. And I would suspect in the next couple of days or maybe a couple of weeks, we will see other countries get involved in Libya. They're already involved, but we're going to see more of it. Turkey right now is moving closer and closer to Russia. So all the indicators that we are seeing right now is that Russia and Turkey are getting closer. Turkey and the U.S. are moving further and further away. And Turkey lashed out at NATO, saying NATO has no right to dictate what foreign policy decisions Turkey should take and what countries it should build relations with. And Turkey is a sovereign country, and NATO does not have this right. So Turkey, what they're saying right now is they're going to resume airstrikes against the Islamic State working with Russia. So does that mean Turkey is abandoning the Islamic State? This is what Russia wants them to do. They want them to close the borders between Syria and Turkey. And we're going to have to watch this situation very closely. But Erdogan came out, and this is a huge blow to the U.S. He is now suggesting that Turkey will abandon the U.S. dollar in bilateral trade between Turkey and Russia. They will transact in lira or rubles directly. So here is another country where Russia and China have stepped in and said, listen, we don't need the dollar. We'll just go through our currencies, bypass it completely. And this is continuing. And more countries are doing this, which is not a very good sign. Because what this means is that once the Middle East falls, once these countries take back and control the oil production, and they sell the oil not using the dollar, the petrodollar, yes, it is doomed. And all the countries that are dealing outside of the dollar, they'll be okay. Those countries that are holding on to the dollar, they're going to have a problem. The countries that are not using the dollar for reserves, they don't have to hold on to the dollar. They'll send it back to the U.S. And this is where we'll see hyperinflation. This is where we'll see the dollar collapse. And we're getting very close to this point in time. We see Russia, they have bombed the Islamic State chemical factories where they created their chemical weapons. We see the Russian long-range bomber, the Tu-22M3, went in, destroyed it, and we know that these chemical factories where the Islamic State have been working, well, that was the United States. And we see right now, the United States, their plans are not going well at all. And I shouldn't say the United States because it's really not the people. It's the governments. When I talk about countries, I'm talking about the governments of the countries. Because the people, they really don't want war. Nobody wants to send their brother, their sister, their son, their daughter, their cousin, their mother, their father to war. Nobody wants this. Because the outcome is disastrous. The only people that want war are the central bankers, neocons, US government, who sit there and say, yes, we must go to war. You know what? And I've said this before. Those people who really want to go to war, those people who are in the government, we should go back a couple hundred years to when the leaders led the charge. So we need Obama. We need McCain. We need all of these individuals who want war so bad. They should be on the front lines. They should be the ones there first. Them, their families, everyone. Because they want it so badly. Instead of them sitting behind a desk and sending everyone else, they should lead the fight. But guess what? They're not going to do that because they're not really leaders. So what we are observing right now is the U.S. has just gone into overdrive. They need this war to start. And it looks like they are prepared to do anything they possibly can to get this war started. And you're going to see in Eastern Europe, in the Middle East, out in the Pacific, you're going to see things really ramp up. You're going to see many false flags to try to get these wars started. And I'm not talking about the Islamic State terrorist type of false flag. They've been preparing for a major false flag to convince the populations that it's time to go to war. And this is what we've been talking about for a very long time. You might see some little ones here and there to scare the people. But the big one that they will be using, and we know there's a perfect storm coming up. We know the elections are coming up in November. We know the economy is deteriorating very, very quickly. Their illusionary numbers, they don't even make sense anymore. The only thing they have right now is the stock market. Look, the stock market's up. The economy's doing well. Hope everyone believes us. That's what they have. When we look at all the economic indicators, the economy is doomed. There's no way out of it. And it's going to accelerate to the downside. That's it, period. So we have the elections coming up. We have the economy deteriorating very quickly, and they need their excuse. They need their excuse, which means they need to blame it on another country or group to cover up what is coming. Does it mean it's going to stop it? No. The collapse will happen. They'll just use a lot of excuses. This is why it's happening, because we're at war. You need to sacrifice. You need to give up certain things. The shelves might be bare in the supermarket for a little while because we just can't get the supplies that we need. Oil, there's a huge shortage of oil because you have to remember, going on to the fiat system in the 70s, we had that huge shortage, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see the same thing as we're coming off of it. So we're going to see shortages everywhere. We're going to be people are going to be scrambling everywhere to get these supplies. But most of the people will be convinced that this is normal during a war time. But this has nothing to do with the war. This is the economy collapsing. They'll be using the war to convince everyone this is why it's happening. But we know the truth. We've been following it. We've been looking at the economic indicators. We've been looking at the political, geopolitical indicators. We've been putting all the pieces together. And we realize right now, this is the truth. The truth is they destroyed the economy. They're bringing us to war. They're the ones planning the next event to scare us to send our brothers, our sisters, our mother, our father, our cousins to war while they sit back and watch. And truthfully, they don't care if it goes nuclear. They have their bunkers built. They built them. They're prepared. They're ready to use them. Because in their minds, after this is all over, the population will be reduced. This is exactly what they want. They'll be able to restart the system. People will not have the same rights because they'll say we'll need a new constitution. And depending on who's the winner at this point, that will be the main reserve currency of the world. And the central bankers, in their minds, I'm not saying it's going to definitely happen, but this is their plan, they will control the system once again. And of course, it will start out on the gold standard, and eventually will come off the gold standard, and the whole process starts all over again. This is what they're trying to do. And in the process of doing all of this, the United States most likely will not be the winner of this war, will not be the U.S., will not be the reserve currency. The U.S. will turn into a third world nation. Everything will be readjusted. Your life will be readjusted. And this is their plan. This is where they're trying to bring us. This is their goal. It's our job to stop this. It's our job to say no. We're not going along with this plan. It's our job, just like our founding fathers, to say we object to this. And this is where we need millions and millions of people saying no. And there will be a time and place when this will occur. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.